Hi everyone, welcome. My name is Maxine Patenaude. I am the host and lead organizer of CreativeMornings Ottawa, a community partner of the Ottawa Art Gallery. It's my honor to be here today to moderate a panel between two Canadian artists. First, I'd like to introduce Claudia Gutierrez, who's joining us in from Ottawa, and Tafui, who's joining us in from Vancouver. So hi to you both. I look forward to our conversation. So let's get a little level set here. So their exhibits, TETHERS SCARS, opened in the Galerie Annexe, the Ottawa Art Gallery's commercial gallery space, just days before their closure due to the COVID pandemic. So I'm here to speak to them both about their artwork and their experiences with that. So let's start off by both of you just quickly telling us about your work in the show. Do you want to start off, Claudia?
Yeah, sure. Thanks for doing this, Max, and having us. And thanks to the OAG for letting us have this chat. Because, like you said, the show closed down pretty early into the show opening. So we opened on Wednesday, March 11th, and we were closed down by the weekend. So my end of the show really came about earlier in that fall when Stephanie Germano, the curator of the gallery, came to my studio, and we had a really great discussion about where my work was going. I had pivoted quite drastically from predominantly focusing on printmaking, and after doing a residency in textiles in Oaxaca, Mexico, was really starting to explore that side of my practice. And so it was going to be and was the first time I showed textile-based and print-based work. So predominantly monochromatic works, really exploring pattern making and mark making that derives from textiles and textiles that have influenced me and my background as a Latina. And starting to sort of explore the ideas of what craft represents in a historical setting in the art world, and what the hierarchies of art making have kind of constituted where craft lies within that art hierarchy.
Thanks, Claudia. Let's now hear from Tafui.
Hi, I am Tafui. I'm originally from Kingston, Jamaica. I moved to Canada right after high school, and I studied fine art and design in Montreal. And then after that, I moved back to Jamaica and then to Ottawa. And the style that you see now was definitely developed in Ottawa. My monochromatic patterns and even my works on wood was developed within Ottawa within the past decade or so of being there. Art has always been my way of expressing myself ever since I was 5 years old. I remember the first week of my elementary school when my mom left, and my art teacher in prep school handed me watercolors and a sketchbook, and she just told me to paint my feelings. And every morning we started school that way, and it was just like breathing for me, and I fell in love with it then. And ever since I was 10, I was like, I'm gonna have dreads, and I'm gonna be an artist when I grow up. And I just focused on that from ever since then. So so it's interesting, like now when I'm looking back, I'm still painting my emotions, and I'm still painting my experience, and I'm still using art to share my stories. And yeah, so I couldn't even imagine. I think maybe if I wasn't an artist, I'd be an anthropologist, because I love culture. But the fusion of all of that has been my practice from ever since I was, I was in university up until now. It's just the exploration of different ways of telling stories.
That's beautifully said. I don't know if you can sort of, in a visual description, kind of give us an idea of what was in your show in a maybe more specific kind of way. Like if somebody were to walk into the gallery, assuming it was open today, what would they see?
Because my work it's abstract, so it speaks about not just my experience, but other marginalized communities that I do and I don't belong to, because not all, not all minorities are visible. And but there's a shared experience among minorities um, that I can speak to and I can speak about, and not because it's not exactly what I'm going through means I can't understand the emotion that comes from going through certain experiences. So for my work, I've always kind of struggled with sharing, especially my fine art pieces that I do on wood. It's very minimal. It's dark. The exterior is almost always in black, but then there's layers of color underneath it that you can only really see in person and when you go up close. So for me, it's more about the inside. It's about getting to know someone, really seeing them and really listening to them. And so I know it's somewhat difficult sometimes when people aren't that familiar with art and that familiar with my language, because to me, I see art, visual art, as a language, and the way another artist might express themselves is very different. So than the way I would. Um, so yes, it is my language, and I tend to put my emotions in it ever since I was 5, and so it's very dark, some of it, and then there's other sections that have a lot of patterns in there. So my patterns are really developed from my textile work, and that was inspired or is inspired by indigenous cultures from across because for me, I don't just see indigenous peoples as just, Canadian indigenous, or someone from West Africa or South Africa is just indigenous. Their stories are very similar, and if you see the issues even now, you can see that the displacement and disconnect of how we live and how indigenous peoples live. There's always a conflict, but I love the way the stories are told through pre-colonial indigenous art, with the use of patterns, and there's like really deep storytelling within patterns, especially textiles too, that I just completely fell in love with. And
Yeah.
so I've extracted a bit of that, and the use of storytelling in that way, and I've applied that to my work.
That's
Yeah,
beautiful. I think
yeah.
that's a great way of kind of transcending us there. But I think I want to jump back to something you mentioned there shortly. But first, Claudia, I know you mentioned that this was your first time exhibiting your textile work at a gallery. So I'm really curious to hear, how did this make you feel with this short opportunity to exhibit at the Annexe, and obviously like kind of curious as well, like where that's taken you in your journey today.
Yeah, I was very nervous and excited. It was a combination of both of those emotions, because I knew that this pivot in my work was fundamental to the way I was going to be carrying on my art practice. I kept describing it as this kind of bottomless well of inspiration now that I am working in such a tactile format. And so I was really excited to show that to people who knew my work, people who didn't know my work, on a platform that is it's a huge platform here in Ottawa. The Ottawa Art Gallery and its new building and the Annexe Gallery are so reputable in our city that I was very nervous to put forward something that was new. It was really new for me. But the opening night went so well, and the show was received so well, and I think people really saw that through line through mine and Tafui's work, how much we do kind of look at the codices of our heritage through textile and really synthesize that through our own imaginations and our own visual language. And so having that wonderful reception was really affirming and motivating. And so when we knew we had to go into quarantine by that Friday, I also worked for the city down the hallway from the Ottawa Art Gallery in Arts Court. And I learned that Friday that we'd be shutting down. I was still feeling that motivation from the show opening, and so got right back into the studio and was just producing more pieces and was feeling great. And then it started to oscillate. Of course, I think like everybody else's emotions during the quarantine, you have good days and you have not so good days.
Yeah, couldn't have said it better myself. Tafui, I'm curious, you mentioned that there's a bit of an experience, obviously, seeing your art in person. So for you, I'd love to hear about your experience exhibiting at the gallery and then that being cut short.
Well, first of all, I'd like to thank Stephanie and the gallery for having both of us at especially at that moment. It was a really good event too. But it was great. I haven't been exhibiting in that way for a long time. I did it a lot when I was in Jamaica, and I kind of just worked on the fringes because I was also working on my language too and experimenting with different mediums and pretty much doing things online and having sharing this with the community online. So it was a little overwhelming at first to have the show, and but it was great. It was really great, and once again I have to say thank you to Stephanie. But yes, it was a little disappointing to not be able to have it up for a lot longer. But it's it is what it is. Because of COVID. But it was just a wonderful space to actually see my work, especially next to Claudia's work, and how we spoke about similar issues and the differences but the similarities all at the same time.
Yeah. So we have time for one more question. I'd love to hear sort of about the direction that you're taking now, obviously with current events and of course just the past few months. I'm wondering how that's impacted your art practice and the future kind of expressions that you're currently working on.
Yeah, I've used this time to experiment quite a bit. I'm looking at new materials, working in concrete, along with my textile pieces, starting to kind of work in harder mediums. And I always am looking at dualities, visual dualities, conceptual dualities. And so I've always wanted to work with stone or concrete. So I've been kind of going down that path and looking at textile in a more 3D language as well. So a lot of experimentation during this time. because I know that it's going to get more into production mode once things start opening up. I was supposed to have actually a continuation of the Tethers series at a local restaurant at Citizen, a fantastic restaurant here in downtown Ottawa. And so once that's ready to go, I am actually going to be having a show there at some point. And so hopefully I can show some experiments that I've been working on then.
So for the people watching from home, and obviously knowing that they won't have a chance to see your work at the gallery, at least not right now, where could they check out some of your work?
Yeah, they can head over to claudiagutierrezart.com, or they can head over to the oaggao.ca. We're also on the Annexe Gallery's Shopify account.
Thank you. That's great. And secretly wish I could walk into this little art space you have behind you. It looks like you have some of your pieces hanging up.
Yeah. Yeah, it's you can't see the mess of the floor, but yeah, this is a more organized corner. Oh yeah, I should also say, sorry, Studio 66. This happened actually during quarantine, which is kind of funny, but I joined the gallery Studio 66, so you can head over to their website as well, and there's some of my stuff there.
Awesome, thank you.
Yeah.
So Tafui, I'd love to hear similar things from you. So obviously, we've been dealing with a lot in the world right now, and I'm curious how that's impacting your creative expressions.
Well, I had a few things lined up, just like Claudia did, and unfortunately, they all got canceled too. But in our current situation, it's my work has also been pretty political with my subject matter, and when I was in Jamaica, I talked with my work. I talked about LGBTQ issues. There is also an issue with police, the excessive use of force from the police, especially when I was in Jamaica. There were quite a few pieces that I did about that. And I do talk about isms like racism and sexism, and how that ultimately creates the end. What we're going through now is pretty much the end result of marginalized people, and so that has always been the source of my communication and of my art. It's how do we see each other as the same, and what's beneath the skin is what's really important. And also being someone who was born in Jamaica with a motto that says out of many one people, where we are multiracial but we have one culture. I know what that feels like, but I also know what it feels like to live in Canada, where we are of all these different cultures and we celebrate that. And having living in a country that has really wonderful social programs, but we can do more. And it's important that we listen to each other, and it's important that you really listen. It's really important. And I have recognized where I too could do better from having the show, having young Black female artists come up to me and say how much it means to them that I am there. And I didn't realize that removing myself, my form, my imagery, because I usually don't like being in front of the camera. I realized that removing myself from my work, how that may also made them feel. And maybe that's just my internal reaction to maybe how I was reacting to not always feeling that I'm heard either. So maybe that's something I need to work on. And but like I said before, I have to thank the gallery for creating space for us, and I'm going to continue the work that I've been doing, and I will try to not be as shy or as behind the camera as I'm accustomed to being. But it's important for the space to be there. It's really important. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you for sharing. Quickly before we have to jump off here, I'd love to also know where our viewers can see more of your artwork, and potentially, do you have any exhibits coming up when the world reopens?
Well, I'm working on a new collection of textiles. I'm also doing, I'm reinventing a poster or some artwork that my now work is based off of. And so there's that. But like I said, a lot of my events got canceled, but obviously you can see it at the Ottawa Art Gallery and also on my website, shoptafui.com. And stay tuned. And there's Instagram too that everyone has access to. And my handle is Tafui.
Great, thank you. All right, that's all we have for today. I thank you both so much. I think we could have had probably an hour long added to this to have even a deeper conversation. But I encourage everybody who's listening to this to please learn more about these artists, look at their work, and hopefully when the Ottawa Art Gallery reopens, definitely please check them out there as well. So thanks everybody.
Thanks very much, Max.
Bye.